You have to describe it past what you can see right here. Most people in life play checkers. They don't play chess. Life is about playing chess. And when you play chess, you're able to pick a couple moves ahead. And those couple moves ahead allow you to be successful. When something goes wrong, if the goal is further in advance, I can look at it as a blip in the world, not a deep hole that I just fell into. But when everything's right here in front of our faces, it's a hole. It's a hole you have to dig out of, and it's useless.
So this one is the chapter where you talk about finding the perfect balance. And as a mom, I'm just going to put that in quotes, like perfect in quotes. And I think that's what your point is as well, because as we've talked about, people look at other people who are successful and they think magic. Like, it just happened. Like, you woke up and it's like perfect. Like, you have a perfect house and the perfect car and the perfect business. But there are true sacrifices that you had to put into place in order to live the life that you had. So let's talk about some of those things. Like, really be like honest. If you are willing to do that, what are some of the things that maybe people are surprised to know that you have had to sacrifice?
Yeah, I think if it's okay, what I'd like to do is take this question in a different perspective, in that in writing this book, when I look at what I sacrificed, I think this chapter especially comes down to what other people sacrificed for me. And my perception of what I thought growing up might have been a sacrifice, which was literally somebody else's. I mean, we talked earlier today about, a minor parenting failure of mine, and in that, soccer practices have changed over and over this week, and I'm exhausted. And my wife and I are doing the late night practices, and the carpool's all shifted. And, every day this week I've had to work extremely late because of being gone on vacation the week before, and the things that add up that have to be handled, and blah, blah, blah. It is life. But the truth is, I had about 7 to 9 minutes to grab my dinner, to walk out the door, and my kids were just all over me about being late and not getting to practice on time, which we were there 15 minutes early. My wife was struggling to pull everything together. We're all in this chaotic state. And on the way there, all I could think about is, what's different from my world from anyone else's? Like, it's the same. We all go through these sacrifices, but this is what parents often choose to do. I chose to do this. I chose to sacrifice that 9 minutes of freedom, and that's all I got before I took my kids to practice, so that they could have a great training, so that they could have a great experience. This is our choice, right? When you talk about finding the perfect balance, we often find these choices and sacrifices, but they're ours. We have to own them. And when I look at this chapter, it really starts off by me talking a little bit about, I think, my parents and some of the things that I learned from their loyalty and consistency. My dad got up every day, put on a uniform, had a lunch pail. He went to work at the same time every day. He got to the warehouse, and he parked his truck at the same time every day and waited till he walked out. When one of his friends got out, he got out at the same day. He could arrive home at the exact same time every single day, parked his truck in the same spot. To me, growing up, it was so mundane, and I'm so embarrassed when I say that, but that's just, to me, I didn't understand it. When I was a really young kid, I loved the uniform. I raced him every morning to get dressed. I tried to beat him every day, and I could never beat him. He beat me every day, probably because I didn't have an alarm. I would sleep in my uniform to school so I could beat him. So that example was heroic to me. It might be mundane, but it was heroic to me. It was loyalty. It was everything that I valued, and that is a part of who I am today. My mom worked enormous hours, like ridiculous hours, as a paralegal, to the point where, she has always thought like an owner. As a CEO of a company, the more people you have that work for you, like my mother, are the difference between 10 other jobs that you create. Millions of dollars of added revenue. unbelievable success because of humans that view ownership when they get up every day. It's not a job, it's what they believe in. It's something bigger than themselves. And that was my mother. And so when I look at this, yeah, financially, there's stories I share that we struggled with a little bit. My mom paid all of their bills. You know, my dad went to work every day. My mom went to work every day. They worked 2 jobs at different times. They volunteered at the school. My mom ran all the volunteer stuff, the Ways and Means Committee at our elementary school, our Catholic school, while she worked more hours than the average human, while she was a working mother in the 80s when moms were still expected to do 100% of mom stuff that the moms didn't do that were working. I mean, it was crazy what I experienced. But that all made me who I am today. And so the imbalanced life of my parents and how they balanced other things taught me the things that were most important to me. And that balancing act is one that can be a trap. I love the quote from Steve Jobs. I'll read it right from the book. My model for business is the Beatles. They were 4 guys who kept each other's negative tendencies in check. They balanced each other, and the total was greater than the sum parts. And that's how I see business. Great things in business are never done by one person. They're done by a team of people. Well, that's how I see great families. Everything that made my family what they were the sum of all parts. It was the traditional loyalty that my dad brought to the table because he came from a childhood of chaos and trauma. It was the success and the entrepreneur brain my mom had that she brought to work every day, but she did so in a very, very confined space. But I learned so much from all of that. And I'm so grateful. And so when I talk about sacrifices, mine are useless. Those are what helped me build what I have today.
That's beautiful because you're right. If you think about it, if you are sacrificing in time and effort to get the things done, you watched it happen in the home you grew up in. So there's a story that you share in your book about your dad having to return a brand new truck for something less expensive when you were younger, and it seems to have stayed with you. Can you talk a little bit about that story and why you think it touched a nerve?
I think the first thing I'll say about stories when your kids are, I'm sharing stories from my perspective. The reality of that story and what I share could be completely different. And what I mean by that is I'm never going to get a straight answer from my mom and dad about their personal discussion that they had. I can only remember my perception of it and what I watched. And being a parent, I understand that more and more, especially having a teenager, because the perception of what you see and what the reality is are completely different things. But the way I saw that was my dad had never had anything new in his life. He had a truck that broke down all the time. My mom had a car that broke down all the time. He was working 2 jobs. She was working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. It was crazy. And I was old enough to perceive the challenges that they were going through. It was a very, very beautiful family, but at the same time, I saw and felt the empathy and the struggle that each other saw in the other. But they loved each other. And so when they argued, it was natural and it was normal, and I was okay with it. But this particular night, my dad kind of came home and had this glow about him, this childlike glow. And he shared how excited he was. And I just remember feeling that energy and looking at him and saying, he deserves it. He deserves it. I don't know if he even deserved it from my mom's perspective, or if he felt he deserved it, or if he really deserved it. But to me, as an 8-year-old or whatever I was, 6, whatever, he deserved it. And my mom kind of just cut it off. And my mom is not cold. She's not ugly. She's not bad. She's not evil in this story. She was paying all the bills. As a financial advisor, what I know is one person in your house pays the bills. One person probably doesn't. The person that pays the bills goes to sleep every night with a little more weight on their shoulders than the person that doesn't. Whether or not it's fair or not, I don't care. It's true. Even if you have all the money in the world, the person that pays the bills has a perception of what goes out every month, and there's an emptiness that watches money go out. My mom had that feeling. I empathize today. At the moment, I might not have. She sent my sister and I to my room. We walked in our family. We joke our house was so small that I took 3 steps and was in my bedroom. I did. I walked through the galley of the kitchen, and I just walked right through the kitchen, and my room literally was right here in front of where they were talking at the table. And my mom said, we can't do it. I'm sorry, we just can't do it. And I heard the defeat in my dad. My dad kind of argued at first, and then he pulled back. And keep in mind, my sister and I were always arguing at this stage of our lives. But it was in these moments we came together. So another reason I remember it so well is because we have a closeness we share in those moments, something that's uniquely different from all the other memories. Things where we're trying to figure it out ourselves. We're supporting each other. She's saying why mom or dad is right, and I'm saying why dad or mom is right. And there's this family dynamic that goes in. It goes into teamwork, right? So then we end up 8 hours in a Ford dealership that I could still remember wanting to kill myself over. And the way that people that barely can afford cars have to go through the financing, and the way that they sit and they get wrung through this stuff is just what's so diminishing. And I remember all these feelings and their frustration and how much money it was costing, and the car we got, which was a good car. It was a Ford Escort station wagon. One of the boringest cars you could ever drive in the entire world, but it was awesome. It was new, it was reliable. And the second part of the story is my dad started riding his bike to work. His car was gone, his truck was broken, and he rode his bike. And another reason this story became empowering is I don't know if it was days, months, weeks. I don't know how long he rode his bike, but I'll never forget him pulling up on the bike, picking my sister up in the summer at the babysitter's, and us walking home 4 blocks in 104 degrees outside on the hottest day in July or August. My dad sweating through his shirt, his lunch pail in his hand on a bike that he probably bought at a yard sale for $5. And I just remember thinking there has to be a better way. And I'm embarrassed that I used to think that way. And I think sometimes my dad and I talk about it now, that I'm not judging. It's just how I'm made. I'm made to fix things that aren't perfect. And I feel sometimes that's a blind spot, that's a strength turned up too loud. So I'm humbly saying this. It's hard to talk about your parents because you're so grateful. And they're both living. They both can see this. Their friends will watch this. But I felt for him. I saw the glow in his eyes with the truck. I can still see what it looks like. I remember him showing us the pictures in the magazine. I remember the sweat and just this look of frustration. And I think when you look at that, it shapes who you become. I was not going to have that struggle. I was never going to feel that. And I was going to change it for me, for him, for my sister, for my mom, and for anybody that I could change it for. That's a part of why I wrote this book. It's a part of why I put these stories out into the world. It's a part of why I feel I need to share it on YouTube, because there's too many people. That's not a crying pause. That's a real pause because I was coughing. There's real people out there that need to hear this, that are struggling, that don't know that the end is so much better. Today, my dad drives one of my trucks all the time. My dad takes it to get it worked on. My dad takes pride in taking care of it. I'm so proud that I can share what I have with my parents. It's one of the proudest things I can do. It's such an honor. And I hope my kids look at my life the same way. If I'm not here, they can watch this video and remember how I viewed my family, and hopefully they'll view me the same. When I was a kid, I was judging my parents. When I'm an adult, I'm grateful. You know, it's all perspective. And so that story was powerful for the glow in my dad's eyes, for the bonding with my sister, for my mom's, amazing foresight and visionary as a leader of our family to know what we needed versus what we wanted, even though she would literally give him and us anything. To her own fault, she would give us anything. And I love everything that is that story. And it's my version. It may not be theirs, but it's how I remember it.
I love it too because it really shows what happens in families. It shows the struggles, the love, the sacrifice. It shows all of that and how the love really trumps all of it.
Yeah, the key component is another Beatles quote, love is essentially all you need. All you need is love. And you don't know that growing up, but to be in a loved family helps you become a successful human. To be in a loved family helps you become able to deal with traumatic events in your life. To be loved allows you to see work and ethic and all those things that go into it, and to know, to never say, I'm here because I did this. And my dad would never say that, even about the traumatic life he lived leading up to that point. My mom would never say that. My uncles would never say that. My aunts would never say that. They're all grateful for the love they have in their lives and how it shaped who they are today. It's powerful.
Powerful. I just want to touch on a couple points as we round out this chapter. And you talk about visualizing. So we talked about your childhood stories and how there was an impetus to get success, right? To like do good and make some money. How has visualizing helped you reach those goals? And what does that even mean?
Yeah. So one of the things you have to learn when you come from a situation where you see a lot of things that aren't going perfectly, it wasn't like we had the right amount of money all the time. We couldn't afford to just get a car when we wanted to. There's this challenge you go through when you're young, especially during my teenage years, where you almost feel like the way the world kind of puts stuff out there now, where everybody thinks everything should be fair. And nothing is supposed to be fair. And nothing that you get, having not worked for it, do you respect. So the reality is, everything I was receiving and seeing in my life was something that was helping me have this perception and visualization, but that towards the future, but it wasn't immediate. Like, I didn't always visualize success because I was literally thinking I was going to be a teacher or a cop, and there's nothing wrong with either of those careers. In fact, I value them even more. My wife's a teacher, and half of the great things that happen are because of her career and the way she changes kids' lives. She gives them hope in what they can see and visualize for their success. And every single police officer I've served, every cop, every law enforcement, every FBI agent that's been a client of ours over the years, what they sacrifice to serve the community, I would never take away from anyone. Like, I have such an honorable opinion of those professions, but I only thought two things existed. That's not visualization, that's a box. I stepped out of the box and started to see the future, but I had to stop thinking and seeing things negatively. I had to stop blaming other people for my problems, my mistakes, my family's well-being, because they weren't doing that, but I was doing that. I've done a video before where I have a letter where my mom wrote me when I was 13 years old, that as I was going through changes and moving to a new school, that the words I said were powerful, and if used correctly could be empowering to other people. But if I chose to use them negatively, they could be very dangerous. And it was a small part that I actually saw during COVID when we got to go through all of our stuff in the house because we had nothing else to do. But it's very important. Visualization to me is describing in your brain what you want to see in the future, but looking further out than you can think. You have to describe it past where you're at. You have to describe it past what you can see right here. Most people in life play checkers. They don't play chess. Life is about playing chess. And when you play chess, you're able to pick a couple moves ahead. And those couple moves ahead allow you to be successful. When something goes wrong, if the goal is further in advance, I can look at it as a blip in the world, not a deep hole that I just fell into. But when everything's right here in front of our faces, it's a hole. It's a hole you have to dig out of, and it's useless. So Dr. Elko, Kevin Elko, I quote in the book, and he says, worry is praying for what you don't want. Worry is visualizing negative levels of success. Worry is thinking about things that could go wrong and then perpetuating them in your mind, developing them, thinking about them. I know my son's gonna mess up. I know he's gonna mess up. I know he's gonna mess up. I know he's gonna mess up. Well, when he messes up, you're like, I knew he was gonna mess up. Well, you visualized it. You made that. You literally focused on only the negative aspect. How about my son's gonna make some mistakes similar to what I made, and hopefully he's gonna learn from them. And as hard as that's gonna be for us to watch as parents, it's gonna be a part of their journey. In business, I'm gonna make failures that cost me a lot of money. Keith Cunningham calls them dumb taxes. It's a dumb tax. It's an investment in my education. It's part of life. And it's not a hole, it's a blip. So worry can be flipped to just side-by-side comparison. What am I fearful of? What am I aiming for? If I put them side by side, most of the time the fear is all made up. And if it actually happened, you'd be better off just getting through it than you would actually worrying about it. And that's visualization when you think about business, when you think about the future. I mean, I visualized this book years before writing it, but I never even thought of writing a book a decade earlier. But as I started to do videos and I started to see the perception that I was having in doing them, and the value it was bringing to other people, I started to say, I got to put it into words because some people won't watch videos. How do we do some of this and help other people? How do we help advisors bridge the gap to be more successful? How do we help families share the stories I've learned from and thrive in the situation they're in now? And that's where that came from.